Welcome to the Jessica Yellin Show. We are live every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 Pacific. And on this program, we connect the dots about what's going on in our world in politics, culture, tech, in ways that are intended to leave you feeling informed, empowered, and ready to act. I am thrilled to be joined today by Skye Perryman. I think you all know her well. She runs Democracy Forward, which is taking the lead and charge in defending the rule of law and challenging the Trump administration in cases in the courts across the country. We're going to ask Skye about where all these cases stand as we approach 100 days. Before I jump into it, I just want to say I look a little bit more formal than usual. It's because I'm coming to you from Dallas, where I have joined the Bush Center, the President George W. Bush's presidential library and institution, the Bush Center, where they're holding a leadership symposium. And we talked about the free press and the importance of the press in America's leadership. It was really a special opportunity for bipartisan connection and conversation, and a reminder that shared values is what makes us all Americans. We can have our differences, but we stand for certain shared principles. And it was a great conversation. I'll share a link to it soon. But now I'm so lucky I have a chance to talk to Skye Perryman. I think you all likely remember her from, we've spoken before, but especially the very first days of the Trump administration when everyone was asking who is doing something, is anyone doing anything to stop DOGE and funding freezes? And Skye Perryman came along and said, I am. Her organization, Democracy Forward, was the first to win a stop on the funding freeze by the federal government, and since then has filed more than 55 legal challenges and launched 82 investigations. Skye and her team have been relentless in her pursuit of truth and the law and holding the government accountable. And it's exciting to note that Skye also made the Time 100 list, which I'll ask you about later. Hi!
Hi, it's so good to see you.
So good to see you. Congratulations on your extraordinarily well-deserved honor.
Thank you. I have a little more makeup on than I normally do. The gala is later tonight, so I'll take some pictures and send them to you.
Please. Yeah. I'm so excited for you. We'll live vicariously through you. I hope you say hi to Snoop Dogg.
I'm planning on it.
Okay. Well, let's start with the big picture. I know that you won one of the first cases filed against the Trump administration when he first came into office. Can you give a big picture look as we approach 100 days? How effectively do you think the courts are holding up as an institution and defending the rule of law and democracy?
Yeah, I mean, that's really the lead here, I think, of this last 90 or so days, if we're approaching 100 days. At first, people were thinking they don't have any power. What do we do? And people do have power, and they have power in a lot of ways, and you always remind us of that. But one way is that in this country, you get to initiate litigation to defend your rights, and you can do that even when the government violates your rights. It's one of the special things about our democracy. And so over the last 90 or so days, there have been nearly 200 lawsuits. I think we're at 200 filed against the Trump administration, not because people like filing lawsuits. There's lots of things to do in the world. I'm a lawyer and I don't even love it all the time. But because what this administration is doing, really, it is violating so many people's rights and our basic principles. And your point about the Bush Library, these things transcend politics and really touch all Americans in so many different ways. So the courts are holding up. We've had, I think more than 50 orders across the country. A lot of cases haven't gotten to the order stages that have either stopped or slowed what the administration is doing or sought to find out. We've seen judges. These are not just cases being filed in one court. In the Biden administration, there were a lot of cases filed in just a few courts. That's not what's happening now. There are cases being filed across the country, and we're seeing judges that are appointed by Democratic presidents, judges that have been appointed by Republican presidents, judges appointed by President Trump himself, are consistently ruling in favor of people and saying, we have to stop what is happening. We need to take a look at it, raising questions about whether it's lawful. We certainly know that these things are harmful. So I think the courts are a real front line for so much, and we can talk kind of about what that has looked like. And at the same time, we have an administration that in some instances is suggesting that they may not have to follow court orders. And so, but you're seeing the courts even stand up to that. And that's really significant, even with this administration threatening lawyers, threatening judges, saying they don't have to follow. You're seeing the courts use the tools they have to continue to push these issues as they should on behalf of people. So I think that the courts are a real front line. They're not a silver bullet, but they're a front line. And I think that's one of the things we can take from these first 100 days.
That's very encouraging to hear. Um, I understand you had a legal victory today. Would you tell us about that one?
We did, and it's significant, and it's not just us. We had a victory in one case, and then there have been a few other cases that had similar victories. But today, on behalf of educators, the American Federation of Teachers, academics, the American Sociological Association, and public school districts, we won a court order blocking nationwide the enforcement of that so-called Dear Colleague letter that threatened to potentially prosecute and definitely cut off public funding to schools and educational institutions if they taught things around race and racism in America. And so we are really pleased about what this is going to be able to do to help students and teachers and educators across the country. At the same time that's happening, there were two other cases today that issued similar orders, which is really good to see that there's not just one court, but multiple courts have said that what this administration is doing with respect to education in this country is unlawful and it has to stop.
I don't want to stay on this too long because I want to move through a lot of cases,
Yeah.
but I just want to ask you, is that it's not the Trump administration is trying to dismantle the Department of Education by attacking many little pieces in different ways, and this is one of the pieces?
So,
Or go
yeah,
ahead.
two things. I mean, we do have a case that we hope we get an order in soon on the overall dismantling of the Department of Education. Also unlawful and totally harmful and has made no one's life better. Like no one's life is better because they're trying to do this. But this is part of that playbook. But this is even more perverse in some ways because not only is this part of a playbook to dismantle education and funding for education in the country, it's also part of a playbook to scare teachers and educators and academics and everyone that cares about our educational system in this country, to scare them into not being real about our history,
I see.
and not being and teaching ideas and history and concepts, acknowledging that racism does and has existed in this country. And so this really is a very important moment because the courts are saying you don't get to do that. The minute the administration, not only did they not follow the law in the way they did it, there's also many substantive concerns with what they've done and how that comports with our laws and our values.
This specifically had to do with the teaching of DEI, which is not well defined in classes, and then you could risk losing your funding. Then you would, yeah, lose your funding. Got it. Um, Let me ask you broadly before we go into more cases about your sense of how much so far the administration, in a way, they've aggressively tested what the courts find. But have they overtly defied? Because I think of the case of the Supreme Court giving them an order to, stop deportations. They didn't do the deportations that night or removals. Are they sort of coming to the cusp of a constitutional crisis while avoiding outright defiance, or how do you assess this?
Well, this is so important because first of all, just to say the courts are such an important tool and we're winning. And so as a result of that, they're now trying to threaten the courts and also say, well, doesn't really matter because we're not going to follow these orders anyway. And so I'm so glad that you asked that nuanced question because we are seeing that in many instances, now not in all instances. I mean, we're in one case right now with the removal of Venezuelan people, where the government appears to have gleefully sought to ignore the district court's order in that case. So I don't want to minimize what's happening, but the bottom line is we have seen that when you push this in the courts and when the judges are very clear and when the government knows that there will be sanctions and consequences, we saw the buses turn around last weekend in that case. And so I think this is an important thing to understand because one of the reasons the administration wants to take to social media and do all kinds of unprecedented things like say, well, we don't have to follow court order or oopsie or whatever they want to say is actually to try to get the American people to back off and to not go into court and to enforce their rights and to sort of think, well, it doesn't matter what I do because we're just going to ignore the court orders. And so part of our work, of course, is making sure that we're continuing to be vigilant and persistent in all of these cases as we have been and to really secure relief for people.
And so effectively, so far, right?
Sure.
So far. Let's start talking about some more of the cases you've brought. You are in court with Judge Boasberg, who's made a lot of news because he is the judge who is been ruling on the case involving Venezuelan alleged gang members in the U.S. who the Trump administration has been trying to forcibly remove under the Alien Enemies Act. And the challenge is over whether this use of this act is even appropriate. Just to catch the audience up, Judge Boasberg has decided that and help me on this one, Skye, that the government either was in contempt of court or may have been in contempt of court by flying the men out while the court hearings were taking place and is going to have to decide who to find in contempt of court. So can you give us sort of an update on where all of that stands? It's so complicated.
Absolutely. I mean, the part that's not complicated is that in this country, you don't get to remove people without any process. And even 9 members of our Supreme Court agree with that proposition. Other things get more complicated in terms of, or the government's trying to make them more complicated in terms of the use of a wartime power at a time we're not at war. We of course believe all of that is unlawful and harmful, and will continue to work in the courts there. But the issue that you're talking about that happened before Judge Boasberg is when he was very clear and issued an order on a Saturday as people were being loaded onto on planes with no process at all. Many of these people are not gang members, and they've never been able to give any kind of process. They've been given no process. And the government continued its operations and then even went to social media and gleefully sort of bragged about the fact that they didn't believe they could be stopped by a court. So Judge Boasberg has issued a very serious order that we see from a federal court, finding that there is probable cause there is probable cause that the government may be in contempt and will continue to do fact finding around what happened, who was responsible, the intent behind it, and those types of things. So it's a very significant order, a step in that process. The government, of course, continues to want to avoid accountability for its actions. And so it has immediately tried to take even that order up on appeal, of course, at a very preliminary stage where we don't believe that the government should succeed on that appeal. So that's what's happening in the case right now. And in fact, there was a filing late last night that we and our co-counsel at the ACLU filed in the DC Circuit.
So the contempt part is sort of working its way up before Judge Boasberg can even proceed.
They're trying to try to dispute every single thing, but fundamentally, there is no question in this country. Court orders are not optional things. You have to follow them. All of us do, including the president. And I think you're going to continue to see this play out in the case.
Got it. And then the underlying, that's just on the side. That's, were they in contempt? Then there's this underlying question, can they use the Alien Enemies Act at all? 2 questions on that. One is the Washington Post reported that the nation's 18 intelligence agencies quietly issued a report to the White House saying you cannot use this because there's no invasion by a gang.
Right.
So that should be relevant. And then 2, is this the same case? Is this the issue that the Supreme Court ruled on when it gave that 2 a.m. order last Friday saying don't take anybody out of the country until we say okay?
They're all very interrelated. So I just will say, and I think we've talked about this before, but the Alien Enemies Act is an act that's been used 3 times in United States history: in the War of 1812, in World War I, and in World War II. And of course, in World War II, it was the act that was invoked that led to the incarceration and internment of Japanese Americans, for which Congress, the courts, and presidents have apologized. A very dark time in our nation's history with respect to how people were treated. Even in those times, by the way, there was some modicum of process, which this administration does not even want to do. So that's a problem on its face. And then you have the fact that, like last time I checked, and it appears that our intelligence agencies agree, the United States is not actually at war and it has not been invaded. And that's what that intelligence report is. So there is, so in that case, we are continuing to challenge, along with our friends at the ACLU, the invocation of that Alien Enemies Act. And at the same time, 9 members of the Supreme Court in an earlier Supreme Court decision made it very clear that under all circumstances, whether you think the act applies, doesn't apply, whatever, people in this country have a right to process, and you don't just get to remove people without process. That order was very clear. And then you had last weekend, actually, as various religious traditions, there was Passover. There was in my religious tradition, we were approaching Good Friday, right? I mean, you had lots of things happening around the country, and the government was actually putting people on buses in order to make additional removals, including after judges in Texas, including judges appointed by the president himself, had issued orders to prevent those. And they were moving people from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. And so last Friday night, there were a range of hearings and filings made. We had one in the Boasberg case. There were other filings that the ACLU made in separate cases that it's working on. And the Supreme Court, late in the night, 1 a.m. on Saturday morning if you're East Coast, late in the night if you're West Coast, issued an order to be very clear that removal should not be taking place, and somewhat a nod to that earlier order that they had issued to be very clear. That was actually in a companion case. It was not in
I see.
Enemies Act case per se that we're litigating, but all of these things are interrelated.
And so the underlying question of can you use the Alien Enemies Act is still, it hasn't, there's
Yes, that's right. Because one of the things we're seeing that this administration is doing is they don't even want to really give the courts time to actually consider many of these things. The minute that you go when and the courts start looking at things and the courts say, wait a second, let's pause this, let's preserve the status quo so we can have process, so we can hear these arguments. The government wants to rush the cases up in various emergency appeals and that. So that's the other kind of thing that's going on right now.
So are we waiting for the court to issue another ruling on that, the high court?
There are a range. I don't believe, I've got to think of what's up at the Supreme Court right now, but there are a range of cases in which the Alien Enemies Act and the invocation of it will continue, including, by the way, in the initial case that we filed before Judge Boasberg.
Okay, let's shift to Doge, because I know you brought a case against Doge and its attempt to access our data at a number of federal agencies. I know you've been successful. Would you tell us which agencies, and in the process of discovery, have you been able to find out what data they were getting, and if so, what they were doing with it?
Yeah, so we have filed so many cases against what Doge is doing at different federal agencies because this administration wants to force people to have to play whack-a-mole and thought American people weren't up for the task. We don't like playing whack-a-mole, but we'll do it if you make it. That's what we've been doing, and our colleagues at other organizations as well. So one that I think really makes sense to focus on is the Social Security Administration, because all of us that have Social Security numbers have very personal, sensitive data there, from things about our income to our home ownership to our marital status, lots of personal information at Social Security Administration. And we've been able to secure court orders to require that Elon Musk and Doge not access that data, and also that they delete or disgorge or return information that they may have. It's very concerning. We're seeing, reports come out by the day about things that Doge and Musk are seeking to do with data across the federal government. So we're continuing to pursue that in these cases, but that's a really significant one. You remember the Treasury data case, and there's been a range of cases there. And then we've brought cases with respect to data that's stored at HHS and at the CFPB. So this is like, Health and Human Services, health data at the CFPB, which is the consumer financial data. and data at the Department of Labor, which is also wage and hour data. That's very personal data. And in those cases, the courts have issued discovery. We've been able to do some fact finding. We're still working on the process in those cases. We filed last week a motion again for a preliminary injunction in those cases based on some of the information that we've gotten. So we don't have all the answers yet. And I know that's really unsatisfying, but we are seeing that the courts, I think at first, I think the courts might have been a little slow to really fully like, what is this? If, doesn't the executive branch, I mean, the president does have a lot of authority. He's the president. Now you're seeing them really look at this and say, wait, this is going way beyond the pale. And the American people have a lot of rights, like the Privacy Act and other rights that protect our data that the government has. And so we and others are in court, working on that every day.
So it was a little bit of a learning curve, but you helped them speed that up. That's promising. It will be very interesting if you can find out what data they wanted and what they're doing with it.
Bring it back. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk for a moment about the federal funding freeze. I'll just remind everyone, right when Trump got into office, remember the Office of Management and Budget, which is his budget team, put out this blanket notice that federal funds would be frozen. So people who were scientific researchers and others didn't know if they were going to get their funding or couldn't. It was because of Skye and Democracy Forward and the people she works with. They went to court and they got that blocked. Skye, two questions. Where does that stand? And I remember at the time, people said it had been unblocked, but I still haven't gotten my funding. So are there people who are still hanging out there?
Well, so first of all, where it is, the order remains in place. We've been able to get it extended. The government, of course, tries to get out of this, but the order remains in place. And since that time, we've won another really big court order with respect to the Inflation Reduction Act and infrastructure bill funds. Those are lots of funds that were going out to essential projects across the country that were all froze that a federal court last week said had to be unfrozen. So I just want to give a shout out to our team at Democracy For, the lawyers and the support staff that are working every day to do this. These are real people. This is very hard. They're working around the clock in order to be able to meet the moment in this time. So I just want to say that, it's not me. It's all of these wonderful lawyers that every day are doing this tremendous work. But we do continue to get concerning reports about people not getting their funds. So I'll say, first of all, the good news is a lot of people have restored their funds. And we hear every day from people that call us to say, this critical community program, this critical nutrition program, was going to be cut off. And because of this litigation, because our clients were so brave and standing up, the National Council of Nonprofits, the American Public Health Association, Main Street Alliance, SAGE. I mean, some of these clients it was very, the early days, nobody was standing up and they did. But we also are hearing reports of people that are not getting their funding. And so when we hear those, we start to investigate them. What was their funding part of? What is it covered by these court orders? If we believe that they're not complying, we raise it with the court. In many of the cases, the judges are now, and this is the other positive news, they're requiring compliance hearings all the time, which is not normal. Usually with the federal government, they get sort of a presumption of regularity, but this is not normal. And they haven't been operating in good faith in many instances. And so there are these compliance hearings. So that is happening. And then there's a range of other areas where the administration is seeking to cancel funds that are different than these funding freeze areas. So for instance, we filed a case 2 days ago on behalf or actually just last night, on behalf of the American Bar Association, where the administration has canceled grants that go to the American Bar Association that help lawyers be trained on how to serve survivors of domestic violence and sexual violence. An arbitrary decision that so there's those things too. I know it's unsatisfying because there's not going to be like one great case that gets everything back to normal. But it's very encouraging that our team and the teams at so many organizations and civil society are here for it and are there and are doing this work.
I want to ask you about one more case, but I also want to give you some other questions. So let's do this one short. Can you just tell us about mifepristone? This is, for anybody who doesn't remember, it's the one half of the abortion medication that a few states are trying to block the FDA's approval of it and the way it's allowed to use. You're in court over that.
Yes. Well, we proudly represent the generic manufacturer of mifepristone, GenBioPro. They are a company, by the way, that was founded as a mission-based company. And they believe that access to reproductive health care, including essential medication like mifepristone, should not depend on your zip code or your income level. And so they produced in the United States the first generic and the only generic version of mifepristone. So they're an incredible client and an incredible company. And they have been, since Dobbs, really, they have been using every tool that they have as a company to try to ensure that abortion, medication abortion, and mifepristone is accessible to people and does not depend on people's zip codes. They have a federally approved product. This case, AHM versus FDA, where very far right groups challenged the regulation and approval at one point of mifepristone in Amarillo, Texas. The Supreme Court, 9-0, again, said that that case never belonged in the court. It was a sham case. There wasn't standing. And now state attorneys generals have come in to that case to try to kind of keep it alive. And so that is happening in the courts now. We're engaged. We have moved to intervene in that case, and we will keep you posted on where things go there.
Okay. May I keep you for 5 more minutes and then I'm going to let you go to your thing? Yes. Okay, good.
Wear my dress. I'm going to put my dress on.
I can't wait. I'm going to ask you about that last. I'm waiting. So, big picture question. I've heard you talk a little bit about the limits of what the courts can do. And the value of bringing cases in part is to educate and inform us and arm us, people who want to get involved in civic action themselves. Would you explain this thinking to us? And how much can the courts do alone? What else is needed?
Look, the courts are doing a lot and they're going to continue to do a lot. But by the way, that's not automatic. People have to go initiate their lawsuits. So the lawyers are going to do a lot, but also the brave people across this country that every single day when they see harm say, we're going to do something about it. We're going to go find some lawyers and we're going to get into court. So I just want to thank everyone that has been part of that. If you're on this listening in and you want to learn more, go to democracyforward.org to learn more about how to get engaged with our work. The courts are going to continue to do a lot, but they're not a silver bullet. And that's the case in all kinds of times. The courts are one tool, one piece of this checks and balances system. And it's really important that the American people continue to make their voices heard and not give up and not become so hopeless that we're not pushing forward for the future. You've seen just this week, right? There is becoming political accountability for these actions. Approval ratings are dropping. People are coming to town halls very agitated about what's going on, wanting to know what they can do. The number one tool that extremists and extreme political actors or the number one tool that they utilize in order to undermine democracy and to undermine the rights of people is to convince people that there's no point in pushing back because they have all the power and there's no hope. And so you might as well just go along to get along. And so you're seeing in the courts a great example of people and communities that are showing up and saying no. But we've got to see that everywhere else too. So whether that's in your communities, with school boards, with issues at the local level, whether it's at the federal level, calling your representatives, staying informed. I love your audience because they always want to be informed about what is going on. That is such an important thing in this time, and that is even more important than the courts. So,
are you worried? Because thank you for that beautiful message. I see posts on social media saying the courts are at a breaking point. They're not going to be able to hold much longer. Is that what you see?
I don't. I think that you see judges, if you would have asked most of those same people that are posting that and most of these same pundits that are posting that last year, they would have told you there would have never even been these wins because the court captured, right? So the courts are going to do their thing. And the beauty of a checks and balances is that no part of the government likes when another part of the government is encroaching on its prerogative. And you're seeing that from judges across the board. That said, this is a critical time, and this is an administration that does want to be above the law. And so we are going to have to continue to push, and that is going to require the people, not just the lawyers and not just the judges.
Okay, I want to tell people about Democracy Forward. You're launching a dinner for democracy and coffee for change, which people can sign up for at your website. But would you tell us what that is?
Yes, this is how we can use the power of people. So we have heard across the country, big cities, small towns everywhere, people want to do something. And so we started listening about what would be important in this time. And it's two things. Number one, extremists want to make you to feel alone and isolated. And when we get alone and isolated, we get scared. It's hard to find courage and it's hard to find hope. And you start believing that you might be the only person that thinks that something's like really wrong here. So we want to find ways that we can create communities and that we can help people foster communities in their own life, both because it's important to take care of ourselves and because courage is contagious and you've got to be in a community often to find that courage. Second, people need to be doing things. And there are things that can be done in this time. And it's so much more fun when you're doing that with each other. And so we are launching Dinners for Democracy. And if you're not up for a dinner, you can do a coffee for change, or you can come up with your favorite slogan. We have kits that we're going to be pushing out. So go to democracyforward.org. We'll be sharing them with you. It can be anything from having a few friends over for takeout to doing some fancy, dinner that you cook for everybody, to a picnic at the park with, a bunch of families, whatever it means for you. And there are kits that will be able to take you through with your community, how you're feeling in this moment, how you can identify areas to be engaged. Sometimes if you just need to support each other because everybody's got enough engagement, they're doing the work, they just need a place to be supported by each other. We have room for that too. And we are launching it at the 100 days. So you'll launch next week to really say we're beyond the 100 days now. We're about the future and we're all going to do this together. And so I can't wait to share with you what people come up with. And I really hope everyone goes and gets more information. We'll share it with you so that you can share it out.
Fantastic. I'll look forward to that. My last question, as we've been talking for half an hour about lawsuits and your work, you're a leader, you're a brilliant lawyer, you've got huge passion. I respect you for all of that. But I also really want to ask you, you're going to the Time 100 tonight. What are you going to wear?
I'm just, this is the most lawyer answer ever, right? But I had to be in Miami for a work trip and I had to be here for things. So I had to wear what I could fit in my, bag that I was country. So I think I've got, what's going to be a great black dress and some cool jewelry. And I did have someone come in and help me do some makeup and hair tonight. So it should be really fun. And I'm excited to see a lot of folks there.
I'm so excited for you. Your glam is fab. I'm sure your dress will be too. And we cannot wait to hear the stories and get the photos.
Absolutely. Well, we'll share them out.
Okay, great. Skye, thank you for your time today and also for your work every day. It's important and we really value what you're doing for this country.
For all of your support, and your community is so amazing at supporting us. We so appreciate everyone that's tuning in.
Thank you. Talk to you soon. Have a great night. Bye. So, what an exciting experience for her. Skye Perryman is now, let's see if I do this. Maybe that's it. No, let's see. There you go. Skye Perryman, remarkable head of Democracy Forward and heading to the Time 100 dinner tonight. I'm told you can never bring a +1 to those. You have to go solo, which is, I guess, a good way to meet people, but a little stressful. Anyway, I think you heard her talk big picture about a lot of cases still working their ways through the courts. Things aren't resolved. But two important takeaways. One is that judges appointed by everyone, Democrats, conservatives, Republicans, even Trump judges, are holding the line and defending the rule of law. You heard a variety of cases in which they've had success. It's also the case that the Trump administration, in a number of instances, has walked right up to the line and backed off. It is true that in the case of the Venezuelan men that they removed to El Salvador originally in the early days when they were testing the limits of the court, they flew them out while the judges' proceedings were underway. And they're potentially in a lot of trouble for that. Someone is. Since then, however, what we have seen is extremely aggressive interpretations of what the courts have said, taking rulings and saying they mean one thing and getting slapped back because of that. But when the Supreme Court has said, no, do not do this, they did not do it. So I think that's an important reminder when you're on social media and you're talking to people who are saying, everything's out of control and, it's chaos. There's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of challenges to the system. But in this particular matter, the administration has walked right up to the cusp of a direct constitutional clash, a direct defiance of the courts, and stepped back. So we have yet to see that complete overt defiance of the courts. Maybe cold comfort or small comfort, but it is meaningful. So I want to mention that next week I'm going to have on the show, we're doing a conversation with Van Jones, the activist, on Wednesday, the mark of 100 days. I'll send out an alert so you can save that. And then a conversation this time next Thursday in 1 week with Julia Angwin. She is a fascinating journalist who reports on the tech world and more. And she's just written a kit called about how to be how to resist, how to be a dissident. Like, what do you do to keep yourself safe if you want to, write and speak the way you want? How do you keep your devices safe? How do you interact? All those things, kind of like a toolkit for these days. So that's next week, and we'll send you out the reminder. And I just want to end on this note. Over last weekend, I think it was, a friend of mine who I've known for a while told me he's running for office. And not the world's most glamorous office. He's running for the state legislature, which is very powerful and important, but not something I expected to hear. And he just said, I'm looking around at what's happening and I decided I need to do something. And there was an opening and I decided I can do this. And these are my skills and this was the opportunity and this is for my state. So I'm going to take this action now. And so I posted on Instagram. We spend so much time talking about what are the problems and how stuck people feel. But do you know somebody who's doing something? What are they doing? Tell me about it. And I want to share their stories. So today I'm sharing my first story of somebody who's doing something. And this story came from Tara Batt. I hope I'm saying your name right. And she wants to give a shout out to her mom, Lori Morrison Fritchell. Lori is the executive director of the Illinois Head Start Association. You know, Head Start educates the young'uns, the little kids, and they're considered a crucial step to having good, healthy, productive, happy lives. And right now, Head Start is under threat. The Trump administration has threatened to eliminate their funding. The Trump Office of Management and Budget said that the federal government should not be in the business of mandating curriculum, locations, and performance standards for any form of education. And the draft budget would eliminate Head Start. Now, it's up to Congress to decide whether that will or won't happen, but part of the goals of Project 2025 is to eliminate funding. I just want to underscore this. Research shows that children who are part of Head Start are more likely to complete school, enroll in and complete college, less likely to be arrested, to enter foster care, less likely to experience poor health. And Lori Morrison Fritchell is part of the front line of taking care of not just her Head Start program, but the Head Start programs across Illinois. And Tara says this of her mom. She's one of the most, quote, hardworking, compassionate, and empathetic leaders in Illinois. She says her mom is committed to navigating the new challenges they're facing and continuing to champion the rights of young children and their families. These are the people who make America great. Our country is so full of people who don't go after the big money jobs or the glamour jobs. They just go and do the work of what matters in community. And they show up every day and they do the service. And right now we're living through a time when the people who do that kind of work are being badly maligned. There is definitely waste in the system and there's fraud and there are ways to take care of that. And that does need, that's a legitimate undertaking. But that is not the majority of people by any stretch. And good people of all parties and every identity go to work every day to serve their communities and one another. And yes, through federal programs. And they receive federal funding for that. And that's part of the important work that America does. I want to tell you that Tara says that there is a great advocacy tab on her mom's website or her mom's program's website, ilheadstart.org, ilheadstart.org, with calls to action and information if you want to show your support or if you're in Illinois and you want to get involved. So I just want to say thank you to Tara for shouting out your mom. Thank you to Lori Morrison Fritchell for everything you do every day for the people who are your team, for the people of Illinois, for the children who benefit from your work. It makes a difference, and we do see you. To everyone else watching, if you have somebody, a person or an organization making a difference, it can be big or small. I just want to know stories of people who are doing something that is a contribution, a positive contribution, and tell their story. If you've got somebody, send an email to community@newsnotnoise.com. Please write in the subject line doing something, because we get a lot of different kinds of emails there, and this helps us search for them. And please tell us a little bit about that person and about the entity that they're doing something through, or the work, or their beneficiaries. It's important stuff. So, thank you to everybody for joining us on today's show. Again, I'll be back next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern and next Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. And if you want to keep up to date with all the amazing people I interview, including Skye today, make sure that you subscribe to News Not Noise. You can follow us on Substack, but what really gets you the content is subscribing by giving us your email and enabling your notifications so you don't miss out. And I'm going to make a pitch for myself, which is if you have the means to be a paid subscriber, I cannot tell you what a meaningful difference it makes. We need all the financial support we can get. I'm on the receiving end of a tidal wave of tips, and I cannot report out most of them. I would like to be able to hire a reporter to help. So if you can afford to be a paid subscriber, and we also even have a way you can make a nonprofit gift, which I'm going to announce soon, please consider doing so. Again, community@newsnotnoise.com for people who are doing something. And thank you for being such a wonderful community, for all the interest and care you show for getting facts, staying calm, and supporting one another. We are a community of people who are not always like-minded, but we are like-valued. And that also is what makes America great. Thank you, and I'll see you next week.